Hey, good afternoon. Robert Varden with the CFI, the International Certified Floor Covering Installers Association. You know, if anybody would have ever told me I'd be hosting a webinar, I'd have had to ask them, what in the world is a webinar? But I tell you, technology today, you know, we've utilized a lot of it. I know everybody through this pandemic is using a ton of it now. You know, I'm really kind of excited today. I know I left you a message on many of the things. We've been posting a lot of stuff on our website. WFCA, the lobbying group, Jeff King. But today we've got a special event because nowadays with, the new money, the new rules, the new programs, and there's so many programs that are actually available for the independent contractor, for us, the installers. So we are extremely fortunate, and I'm really excited to tell you that we actually have Jeff King. Those of you that don't know Jeff King is as much of a CFI guy as anything else. But on top of that, Jeff is in a phenomenal legal counsel. He's a legal counsel for CFI, for WFCA. He spends a lot of time in Washington and he keeps absolutely 100% up to date with everything going on with all of the issues that we're facing right now. So we thought, what better than to get Jeff, because we've had a lot of questions. You know, everybody's kind of talked a little bit about all the PPPs and the SBA loans and all the things that are available. But yet it's so confusing and there's still so many questions. And then some of them don't even realize too about the unemployment that are actually available now for us as independent contractors. So without me getting any further along, I'm very happy and excited to introduce Mr. Jeff King, who's going to walk through us. I want you to know too, if you've never done Zoom, because I only say that because I'm certainly a little new to it. You know, there's a question and answer box down below. Put your questions in there. Now I will tell you, after knowing Jeff for many, many years, and talking with Jeff so much, and I love the guy, I'll have to kind of break in on him. So Jeff, I'm just going to tell you, I don't mean to be rude, but when Jeff starts going, but please send in your questions. If it's pertaining to what he's talking about, let's certainly get those questions answered as best we can. So without anything further, I'm going to turn it over to you. Mr. Jeff?
Thanks. Thank you very much, Robert. If we were all together, I'd scream CFI. But I'm not going to get that screen back to me, but I call it anyway. Folks, I'm here to answer your questions, not to give you great presentations. But I thought maybe what I'd do in the beginning, give you a short PowerPoint, sort of explain what's out there, some precautions to take, some opportunities you have. So with that, if you could pull up the PowerPoint, we'll go through a short PowerPoint. And again, this is really meant for you. It's so that if you guys have any questions, just type them in either on the chat box or the question Q&A portion on the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer them all. And I'll stay here as long as we need to answer everything you guys have. So without further ado, let's go through this, okay? Trying to get this to control, Louis. There we go. First thing I want to talk about is some opportunities for you all to get some money, okay? Almost everybody here has probably heard of the CARE Act and the what they call the PPP loans. It's a Paycheck Protection Program. You have to be under 500 employees or otherwise qualified for a small business loan. It covers 8 weeks of payroll costs, rent, utilities, and interest on mortgages and business loans. It's forgivable if you use 75% of it on payroll. You pay the same number of employees you pay during a comparative period, and you don't drop anybody's salary during that comparative period by more than 25%. There are tons of new regulations. There's new restrictions on reserves and needs, but the simple reality is that if you get a loan for under $2 million, you're basically pretty much guaranteed that provided you use it the correct way, you're going to get it all forgiven. So you can get a small business loan, and it applies whether you're a company, an LLC, a single proprietor, a business owner, anything. The rules may slightly change in how you calculate it, but the reality is that you can get it. So for example, if you're a single LLC company or an independent contractor or sole proprietor, all of you file taxes. And you're going to go to that tax form, and most of you, for your company, file what's called a 1040 Schedule C. And that is basically your business income minus your business expenses. You're going to grab that form out for this year's taxes. You're going to go down to line, I think it's 32, which is your total taxable income out of there. And you're going to multiply that by 2.5, and that's your loan. It is that simple. You apply to a bank, use your local bank if you can. If you have any relationship with the bank, it'll expedite it, but there are other ways to get around it. CFI and WSA is working with a lender called On Deck to see if they can expedite the process for you. That program is up and running. I'm not sure how well it's working yet because I've not looked at it recently. But if you can't find your own bank, let somebody at CFI or WSA know, and we'll sort of help you out with that. There's also, for those of you who have bunches of employees and you've been busy, in other words, you haven't seen this big drop off of business, there's a thing called an employee retention tax credit. And what that says that you can't get a PPP loan if you use this, but if you keep your employees employed, you get to take 50% of that payroll cost, which is payroll, insurance, retirement benefits, the employees pay your employee payroll taxes on it. You get to take 50% of that and take it as a tax credit. And a tax credit is not a deduction. It's once you calculate your taxes, you get to deduct that amount from the total taxes due. And that's good through the end of the year or until you get back to 80% of your business. So that may be an alternative if you've not been particularly slow and you still have maintained your business. You can look at that. There's also emergency small loan, business loans. They're called emergency injury disaster loans. You can apply for those. They have been restricted since the beginning of May to just agricultural facilities. They should open back up. If you apply for one of those loans, you get an immediate $10,000 grant within 3 days. And that grant, now I will tell you, not everybody's gotten the grant that quickly, but that grant is totally forgiven if you don't get the loan. Okay. There are other loan programs. Just be aware of it. You can call your bank or the Small Business Administration up in DC. There's a local one in every state and probably most basic areas. There are bridge loans. There are government contract. If you do any government contract work, there are loans there they can give you. There's even access to capital. So if you need to, you need some, had beginning of some improvements, putting a warehouse in for yourselves or a workroom, you have those opportunities. I don't expect most of you to utilize these. Again, Lewis, this is not working. There we go. There are also state programs, and you need to look at your state programs. Our local town above me, it's called Boynton Beach, is giving out small businesses $25,000 free grants. Okay? You may have one in your state or your area. You need to check these out. Many states have created these loans. Many have created grants that are not, which means you don't even have to pay them back. I have a website here. This PowerPoint and this program will be posted on the CFI website. So if you need to pull this up to get the website for yourselves, you can do so. I'll leave it up for a second. You can also take a picture of it on the screen and you can then type it in. And that will give you state by state, locality by locality, what grants and loans are available for you. That's not federal loans. These are state money. Some of those are pure grants, money that he had. There we go. There's also unemployment benefits to you. And this is a really unusual concept. You've all heard about them, two of these. It's called the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. And they get granted an extra 13 weeks on top of what is normally 26 weeks of state benefits. And you've all heard of the third one I listed here, the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, where they've added an extra $600 per week to whatever you get. That has created some problems, both for the retail members and a number of you workrooms, where your people are making over 50 on an average of over $1,000 a week and may not want to come back right away. We can talk about that in another webinar. We can talk in the question and answer period. But those are available. But what's more importantly if you're self-employed, an independent contractor, or otherwise not normally eligible for unemployment, you also get to apply for it. It's the first time this has ever been opened up. Generally, to get unemployment, you have to be an employee. You can't be the employer. Well, if you're self-employed or an independent contractor, you're not eligible normally for it. Well, you are now under this program. Program runs through the end of July. I believe you'll find this will be extended through the end of the year. So if you're suffering and you don't have money, this is a way to do it. These are all state-run programs. So you have to apply to your state, and the local rules will apply. And even if you're making less than you used to make, it's worth checking out. For example, Robert, if you have somebody down there in Texas and they're making the maximum amount, they're going to get $1,113 a week. Well, all of a sudden they get a little job, and that's going to pay them about $200 a week. Well, what Texas does is that the max is $513. The first 25% of that, which as you can see is about $125 plus, you get no matter whether you work or not with it, even if you make money, up to that amount. And then after that, they take dollar for dollar off of the amount. So let's say you get a $200 job, but what they'll do is the first 125 they don't count. The next 75 they do count, and that'll lower your unemployment benefits by $75. But the reality is that you've just made now an extra $50 by working that little job, $125 job. So even if you're getting a little bit of money, if you're not making at least $1,000 a week in Texas, and you had been, you will be able to be eligible for unemployment. And I'd run and look at it, all of you, if you don't have that money. Come on, sweet pea, move. Here we go. You got to follow precautions when you go back to work. Some of you have been working steady, and I'm sure some of you are used to this. Some of you just beginning to open up. Many of these shelter-in-place laws are being lifted. They're being lifted slowly. Many of you already had work under the being an essential portion of an essential industry and construction. Some of you do not. There are a number of guidelines out there. CDC has issued guidelines. Just late last night, early this morning, they issued a whole new set of 60 pages of them. They don't specify construction, but they do specify opening businesses. We have put out a guide for you on this, and we'll get through that in a moment for you to look at. None of these new CDC programs really change much of that, if anything. And they're a pain to go through. You have to click on this program, then you got to, when it says, well, then go to this one, and you got to go through like 4 different websites to get to the bottom line of what you have to do, and then you got to click back to go back for the next rule. So it's a rule saying, well, you have to do this, and you have to go here to check out what that means. So it's kind of hard to go through. We're going to summarize them all for you. We already have done it once. We'll make sure they're up to date. OSHA has rules for workplace. There are guidelines. They're not mandates. But the states are starting to look at them as a mandate. New York has internal guidelines just for construction, as does Massachusetts and California. You need to check with your state. Every one of these guidelines that we have looked at, all are consistent with what we have provided to you last week, and a little update to you, which gives you a checklist of what to do. So make sure you check with your state, and you can do that by simply contacting your state licensing bureau, probably for construction. Most of you are licensed, and you can ask them if they have any guidelines on construction. You can also check with your local home builders association. They'll have updates for you as well. Or you can check with us and we'll look for them. Yes, sir.
I didn't know if you could hear me or not. Before we get too far away from the grants, I had an interesting question here from David. I think he's maybe thinking of doing something more on the education side. His question is, the grants that you're speaking about, he wants to know if any of those can actually be used for opening up something such as like an installation school.
The grants at the moment only allow you for existing businesses. You have to have the business in existence that had to be in existence prior to February 15th, 2020. So you couldn't open up something new and get a grant for it. So the answer is no. The grants also are not available for any nonprofit except for what is called a C3, which is a charity. or an educational institution. So that's where the grants are available for them. So the answer is no, you couldn't do it for something new. But you could, the new bill that's now, it's called the HEROES bill that came out of the House, that's going to get negotiated. And there are many things in there the Republican Senate does not like, and a lot of those are going to get changed over the next month before this thing is passed. But one thing that's likely to be included is they're going to allow C6s to be able to get these PPP grants. And in doing that, that may allow these grants to be available to people like CFI, WFCA, and others that are basically educational institutions or these associations, okay?
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's go and give you a little checklist, and then we'll try to see if we can open this up more. So there's a full checklist on the CFI website we provided, I think, last week, Robert, if I'm correct. But you need to take some precautions when you start going back to work. You know, obviously, pre-screen workers, your employees or your helpers before, and if possible, the people in the home or the building managers, wherever you're going, if you can buy one of those little temperature guns, grab the dang thing and just take everybody's temperature. And if it's not normal, that's a sign you got to let them go home, or you got to think about whether you want to go into that building or that home, okay? If anyone's feeling ill or showing signs of the coronavirus, they should not work. And in fact, if you notice any employee showing those signs, you need to send them home. The CDC recommends that if they expose others, employees or workers to that, then those people should self-quarantine for 14 days to make sure they don't have the symptoms, okay? Masks should be worn at all times, every day, and a new one should be worn every day. Be careful, though, that there are some requirements about wearing masks, like asbestos remediation, silica dust issues. You have to apply, that's a more strict mask requirement. There's ventilator system. You have to apply that. But all of you should wear a mask every day on this. This virus is, the mask will actually help the person next to you more than it'll help you, but it'll help both of you. There's a cute little drawing I saw. No masks, 100% likely to transmit it. If you're wearing a mask and you're less than 6 feet away, you're still very likely to submit it if the person next to you doesn't have a mask and you do. If you both have masks, it's much less likely. If you're 6 feet away with a mask, you're very unlikely. If you're not in the same building, you're very likely not to give it to each other. So there's a cute little cartoon. We put it up at one point to let you all know about it. You need to wash your hands constantly, whether you're going to the bathroom, if you go outside, anything that you're touching that could have the virus on it. That's not always feasible. If you're in a construction site, you know, there's not always a feasible way to wash your hands. So have hand sanitizers. If you're the contractor or the sub that's providing the workers, make sure they all have that ability to be able to wash their hands. They need to disinfect and clean their workspaces and tools daily. This is unusual. You usually don't clean your stuff, but I truly mean they have to wash them down and clean them with a disinfectant that's at least 60% alcohol, within the realms of what the tool can take. You don't have to ruin your tools to do this, so be cognizant of that. Practice social distancing, that famous 6 feet away. You know, try to do that. I saw a great cartoon where everybody had on a big truck tire on them. So by the time they bumped into each other, they were each 3 feet from the edge of their tires. So I'm not suggesting you all wear big truck tubes around your body, but you need to maintain that. That will help a great deal. Stagger shifts if you can and take breaks. Don't all go to the same place at once. Don't all go to lunch. Don't all sit down and have lunch together. I know we'd like to congregate, do not. And tell your people not to do it. I would wear booties. Generally, you can pick up the coronavirus on your feet. And most people don't care about it because you can't get it through your feet. Okay, so, you know, if somebody walks into my house, it's probably not a particularly bad thing. I'm not going to be walking, even if I walk barefoot, I'm not going to get the coronavirus. It's a little different with you folks. You're on the floor. Your hands are touching that floor. The next thing you know, your hands are wiping your nose or scratching your eye. You know, doing something that could spread the virus. So be careful. I would suggest you wear booties. I truly suggest you wear booties. And change your clothes before you go home if humanly possible. You don't want to bring whatever you got at your work facility, bring it home to your family. Advise about possible delays. And lastly, we're putting out a waiver. So when you go into somebody's home, we're going to give you we're putting this out hopefully at the end of this week or the beginning of next week, and just sit there and say, we're taking all these precautions. We want you to tell us whether you have anybody who's been exposed or sick here. You tell me they're not, but I don't want to be held liable if somebody gets sick because we're following precautions. And this is there's an inevitability that somebody along the line is going to catch this. So I want you to make sure that you get those. Those will be published on the CFI website, and they'll be available to you hopefully early next week. I'll go to the next slide. And
you know, Scott, Jeff, it's interesting you say that. You know, I unfortunately had somebody come onto a piece of my land and stole a piece of my equipment here just recently, and had to have the sheriff come out. And you know, the sheriff's office had a complete line of questioning that they sent me through before they even showed up at my house. And it was basically, have you had a temperature above this? Have anyone in that household had the coronavirus? I mean, there was a complete line literally from the sheriff's office before they sent the sheriff out to my house. I mean, obviously they wouldn't do that in an emergency, but there again, you know, as I was listening to that, I'm thinking to myself, you know, if I'm an installer, is my retailer, does he have a list like this for the customer that I'm going in their home? I just thought that was pretty unique.
Yeah, you'll actually see this new form actually, basically, it's not meant to be offensive, but it's meant to protect you. So the first thing on it is saying this is very contagious. We are following all reasonable safety precautions, but we can't guarantee that this won't be, people can't get it because it's so highly contagious. And therefore you recognize these risks by us coming in your home, and you're going to them, hold us harmless, defend all that crap that we've talked about many a times in seminars, against any liability. And then we said, to protect everybody involved, please affirm that. And then we have a list of questions, and they check them off and they sign it on the bottom. And that's what we're asking to do. It's a one-pager. It's not particularly, it's a little legalese because I want to protect you all, but it's basically straightforward form. And we're going to have that out for everybody hopefully next week. And we're going to have one for the home, and we're going to have one for commercial sites, okay? So that should help you.
Okay. Well, Jeff,
there's some questions coming up I can see if you want to read them off.
All right. We've got an anonymous here, and he's asking, or she's asking, that do you know if by any chance they are planning on changing any of the rules for changing the payback functions for those businesses that cannot even open up, say, for even a month after the loan is secured?
Yeah, this has been a horrible circumstance. First of all, they made one rule change already, and that is the 8-week start either on the day you get your loan, which is what originally they had mandated, or if you pay at least bi-weekly on the next normal payday. So on the next normal payday, that would start the new pay period, you can use that. So you could actually get it extended technically by close to 2 weeks if you pay bi-weekly. If you pay weekly, you can get it close to a week extra on it. The HEROES Act, which is the act the House passed, that is now going to be negotiated, that does extend it to 28 weeks. You have to spend it sometime during the 28 weeks. It also gives you a pass on what if employees will not come back. And that's already been in the rules. They've added a new rule on that. It doesn't affect the 75% portion, which is troublesome. And the HEROES Act would affect that. But what they said, if you have to maintain the same number of employees during this 8-week period as you had either last year from February 15th to June 30th, or from January 1st to January 29th of this year, you get to pick which period you want to use. And they just compare them. So if you had 5 folks in your employ and you had only 3 of them back, then you're not going to get the whole loan forgiven. They're going to reduce the loan amount by that amount. What they said is if you make a written offer for the person to come back and you document them refusing to come back, then that doesn't count against that number. So there has been some relief already given in it. If you looked at the new forms, they just came out, instructions, they're about as confusing as you can get. I've already had a bunch of questions. We're probably going to put out within the next week or so sort of a list of answers and questions on the form so we can help you, guide you through it. It's a lengthy form. It's a seemingly inconsistent form. For a good example is that when you put down your payroll costs, it only allows you to use employees, not self-employees. So if you're an owner-operator, an owner-employee, like many subchapter S's would be, and many LLCs are, you don't get to include that. They have a separate line for that. But you don't know how many people were panicked because I got my loan paying myself and now I can't use it. But the good news is when they count how many employees you have back, or the bad news, they don't count the owners either.
Gotcha.
So in other words, if you had 4 employees and yourself, and you only bought one back, you have 1/4 of your loan forgiven, not 2/5 of it because you count yourself as well. On the other hand, I think they make the assumption you're always going to pay yourselves if you're the owner operator, and you're going to be the first one back to work. So they've made some rule changes. They've already changed. We're very hopeful that the HEROES Act or some form of it will include these changes, which means that when you go back, after you get it forgiven, you can go back and get more of it forgiven later, once that law passes. I don't see that happening before the end of this month, obviously. I think there's a good chance it won't happen until very near the end of June when you see that act pass, if it's passed at all. But I do believe these portions will survive.
Okay, Jeff, I've got a question here, and actually I'm going to answer part of it on what I know from a local standpoint, and then I'm going to ask you to ask us what you know about it. The question is, are you aware of any states that are actually requiring safety documentation? Now, I can say locally, I don't think we've had anything from the state, but I know, talking to different contractors that are going to different job sites, even my brother who's a contractor, I mean, one of his job sites, he has to show up there at 6 a.m. in the morning to have his temperature taken. And if he doesn't have his temperature taken that morning and he passes, meaning he doesn't have a temperature, he cannot work on that job site. So there's been a lot of things like that. Many of the job sites are requiring every contractor on there, every individual on the job site to wear masks. I know he's got another job site where they had to limit how many people they could have on the job site. So he had to choose a shift, either an early day shift or a late evening shift. But are you aware of any states that are requiring anything?
First of all, I got to do a slight disclaimer. I'm not licensed to practice law in every state.
Yes.
And I can't give legal advice on the laws of any other state. And the states I'm a member of, New York, Florida, or active member of it, Florida, DC, and Maryland. Was a member of the New York Bar as well, but I'm no longer am. That I cannot tell you. My recollection is some states do require some documentation. I do recommend you document it anyway. Because what if somebody comes back and sues you because they got sick? And you have documentation, you took all these precautions. Remember, you're liable not because somebody got sick. There's not strict liability here. You're liable because you didn't do something. You didn't take reasonable care to prevent somebody from catching the virus. There's no absolute certainty of not catching this virus. Plus, you don't control, other than those time they're at your job, how this is done. But if you take the precautions we've outlined and you document that, so every day you check their temperature and every day you put down, what their temperatures were, just document it down. Document that you require masks, that you've provided them and require them. Document that you have hand sanitizers there if that's what you use. All the things, you're going to end up paying people a little more, particularly on a piecework deal where in certain states where you also have to pay for downtime, but you're going to need to make sure that document the fact that they clean their tools. Don't let them share tools if that's possible. Or at least, the more documentation you have, the more likely somebody's going to sit there and say, you caused this. You're going to be able to say, no, I didn't. Look what we did. We did all reasonable steps. So whether required or not, at least keep some documentation of the precautions you took.
Yeah, that's interesting because I don't think even the guys that I've talked to that have had to do this before entering job sites, I don't think they're doing any documentation of it. I think this is just, a contractor requirement prior to going to the job site. Another
Yeah,
interesting.
Robert, and there's a good example. He's protecting himself.
Yeah.
He's showing you that I took all these precautions. I'm not letting someone on my job site who might have this virus, who could pass it on, who's not wearing a mask, who's got a temperature. I'm not letting him here. And so he's taking reasonable precautions to do that. And it's a very, very smart move.
We got a question that almost kind of falls right along with that. I got a gentleman that's asking, so if they don't pass the safety protocol, whether that be with their retailer or their contractor, even though they were offered the job to come back to work, would they then be able to go back onto unemployment?
You should be, because you're not allowed to work because of the safety protocols.
Sure.
Which are reasonable. So you should be allowed to go back on that. And that could include if you sit there and have the whole crew is sent home because one of them came down with the serious of the virus and they've been all working with him for the past 2 days. You may want to send that whole crew home for 14 days, let them apply for unemployment for that 14 days.
Right.
And then if nobody gets sick and everybody's fine, you can bring them back once that's done. Remember, if you send them home, they're going to claim some type of right to any kind of leave, sick leave, because they have the virus. Make sure you remember that they're sent home and you have to only pay that leave. And remember, there's a law that new family leave and sick leave mandate that people under 500 employees have to pay family and sick leave, 2 weeks of sick leave and 10 weeks of family leave. In certain circumstances, one of them is if the person has symptoms, but only to the extent that while they're pursuing a diagnosis. So they can't get home and sit by for 14 days. They have to seek an active diagnosis.
And they're also asking then, how would that affect the PPP loan?
Well, it does affect the PPP loan, but the answer is, can you find other crew members? It don't have to be the same people you pay. You just have to pay 75% of it. And the average pay for the people you do pay that you paid before has to be within, you can't lower them more than 25%. And the total number of employees have to remain with, the same. But it doesn't have to be the same employees. So if you can get another crew, you can bring in some other people to do the crew. That's not so easy. I mean, this is a skill. It's not like,
Now, you keep saying employees. What if they're independent contractors?
They're independent contractors. It's different. If you're sent home as an independent contractor, then you'll just, and you've got a PPP loan, you still pay yourself. You can still pay yourself. If you pay yourself, you won't be able to take unemployment because you're paying yourself, correct? But that's a forgivable loan. And you're paying yourself for zip, and you're not going to have to pay for it. If you take unemployment, with pleasure to do so, you're going to get taxed on the unemployment. That's a taxable income at the end of the year.
Okay, we've got one because there's, some installers when even their apprentices or their helpers, they're an independent, but then they kind of pay their helpers, let's call them. I hate using that word, almost by the piece. So it's almost like they're subcontracting from the subcontractor. So in the event, whether it's a retailer paying an independent contractor or whether it's a contractor paying somewhat of a subcontractor, would that be considered monies being paid out to employees, even though they're independent contractors?
No, the rules are very clear that you only get to pay employees out of the PPP loan and yourself. I mean, you can, if you're a sole proprietor, if you're an independent contractor and you hire other independent contractors as helpers or day workers, whatever it is, you only get to count what you pay yourself. And so that, again, you're most likely going to go to your 1040 Schedule C and look at that. I think it's line 31 or 32. I don't remember off the top of my head. And that will give you the amount of your loan. You divide that amount by 12 with a cap of 100,000. So if you pay yourself 130, you take 100 of that. You divide that by 12, which comes out to $8,333 if you're at the cap of 100, and then you multiply that by 2.5, which comes out to, as you can see, $20,000 I think that's $20,866.
Great.
So that's how it's done. But you don't get to, no independent contractors count towards your costs. And that includes the retailer. They don't get, if they hire you as an independent contractor, they don't get to claim you in their PPP loan either for payment or for amount got. There was some confusion in the beginning about that. But every independent contractor, every one of you is entitled to a PPP loan. And I recommend, if you have not, apply. The money will run out. They're going to probably put more money in it. The new Heroes Bill does not include any new money, but they're probably going to put more money in it. And I would tell you, get it now. And you pay yourself, even if you end up not using it all. Okay? So you pay if you're an independent contractor, you pay your normal pay every month. That leaves 25% of it not forgivable unless you use it for utilities, your car lease, maybe you lease your truck. So you can pay it for that. Your telephone, utilities if you have a small office, whatever it is, you can pay for that. Excuse me, my nose is running. I'm not sick, I've got allergies here. So you can use it for that. But even if you say you have 10% of it left over, you can either pay it back immediately if you don't want a loan, or you can keep it for 2 years. No payment is due for the next 6 months. You keep it for 2 years at 1% interest. I don't know where else you're going to get a 1% interest loan as you struggle through this process. You may find out that come August and September and October, when the temperatures are high, the likelihood of it coming back is not as imminent. You may be booming with business. Pay it back then. You know, for a 1% interest loan, you get yourself through this time. And you can continue to use it to pay yourself after the 8 weeks. You just don't get it forgiven after that. And if the law changes, you may be able to get it all forgiven after that as well. So that's what I would do.
Great. Well, we've got some great questions and answers, or great questions coming in. So believe me, guys, if you have any other questions for Jeff, right now's the time. So please send anything you got.
As people are searching, I want to mention that Robert and I have talked about, and I think we'd like to do some more of these. So we'd like to know what you want them on. I'd suggested maybe we want to look at what do I do when my employee doesn't come back? How do I figure out how I calculate the PPP loan forgiveness portion of it? You know, those types of things. What if I can't get my unemployment? What are my rights and opportunities there? Whatever you guys want to talk about, I'm trying to help you out with this stuff, because this is a troublesome time. And I want to make sure you survive it. I want to make sure you're on the other end of this thing, so I get to see you at some convention along the way. Actually, one of the sadder portions is I think it's becoming increasingly likely we'll get to see everybody in August. I'd like to, I really would like to encourage you all to continue to send me questions. You can also email me. I believe if you go to the CFI site, you'll see we have listed the precautions to take to open safely. And on the bottom of that is my email address. So email me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. I've answered, Robert can probably have seen a bunch of these answers. They're already, all of them are on the WFCA site. And I think that's easily accessible, but there are hundreds of them. There are days when I answer 30 questions a day. So I'm happy to help you all. Looks like we've got some more, some more questions.
Jeff, we've got one, and it's pertaining to the SBA loans. If you were approved and you take it, but you don't use it, and you pay it back before the 12 months is there, before they treat attached, I'm not sure what exactly they meant there.
The answer is this. It's not quite as simple as that. The interest runs on it, even though they don't pay during that 6 months of no payment due. It continues to interest run. So you'll owe some interest on it. So if you take it and you take it as a precaution, that's fine. But just when you pay it back, you're going to owe 1% interest on that amount for the amount of time it was from the, I think it's from the day you, the end of the 8 weeks, but they have not made that clear. It's either going to be before the 8 weeks or the end of the 8 weeks. So if you got the loan now, or assuming it's due now, you'll have, you'll have a small interest amount of 1%. But it may well be worth taking because there's money in the bank for you to use later, even if it's not a forgivable portion.
Well, 1% is free money. I mean,
Well, that is, and remember, you can pay yourself, even if you're busy right now, and you get the loan because you're anticipating this is going to be a problem, then pay yourself out of the loan.
Mm-hmm.
Because, or pay you and your employees out of the loan, because that becomes a forgivable amount. Even if you are making other money, put that money aside. So now that money sits there for you when you do have that bad downturn. And if you believe our healthcare folks, and there's a good reason to believe them, then you're going to have, there's going to be a resurgence of this sometime in the fall. As the temperatures drop, just like any other virus, that virus reemerges. And since we're unlikely to have any kind of vaccine to prevent it, you're going to see resurgence of this. And
Sure.
Whether there's going to be shutdowns again, I'd hope less panic type, but no matter what, there's going to be less business at the time. So you have the money then.
Yeah. And that was actually another question that came through, and I think it's almost trying to look into a crystal ball, but what happens if the states do shut down? I mean, stay shut down. And obviously, I guess nobody would know until we get to that point.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. So I think we have some other questions going already.
So Jeff, from your perspective, and believe me, for the audience, Jeff is very involved with CFI and does a lot with us, and probably knows more about installers and installation than any lawyer or attorney I've ever met. So Jeff, if you were to, knowing installers and how they operate and how they work, and you know the industry so well, if you had to pick, say, the top 3 things that a professional installer would really need to be aware of at this point in time, what would you say?
1, the financial opportunities for you, meaning PPP loans, local grants. Do not forget those local grants. Your small businesses, they want you in business. There's some real money out there. Check those out. 2, don't forget your business obligations. You don't want to let your insurance lapse. You may find you can't get it again because there's been a tremendous issue with insurance. You may want to look at those opportunities. And 3, promote yourself. This is a good opportunity. What about if places are still being shut down and they don't have business? What a great time to remodel. You say, listen, we're taking all these precautions. We have this checklist of things we're doing. This may be a good time for you to put that new floor in. Since you don't have the business anyway, it's not going to affect you very deeply, whether that's a hotel, a restaurant, or some other. This could be a very good opportunity for you to start pushing that up, those aspects. And work with your local retailer. They may have opportunities for you because they themselves are probably doing the same thing, looking for new business. The better retailers, the better installers are saying, crises create problems. They also create opportunities. Don't forget the opportunities.
We got a great question here, because of course my background being in the commercial aspect of things, and with all of the sick crews and so forth, obviously it's causing delays in some of these commercial contracts, due to the sick crews. Are you aware of any case or anything that's in how they've handled something like that? Because sometimes the damages are huge.
Yeah, they can be huge delays. You have contracts that have these delay issues in them, and the question is going to be, each contract depends on how it's written, and I'd have to look at every contract to see it, and then look at the state law for it. Generally, there's a force majeure clause in them, but there's also an implied covenant of practicability in most contracts, in most states, I should say. So if it's not practical, you can't be blamed for it. In other words, I couldn't finish it because I wasn't allowed back on the site. I couldn't finish it because a virus intervened. So you have multiple ways of looking at that. I hate to say this, but ultimately you may have to go back to an attorney to get this. But generally, don't let them say just the force majeure clause doesn't apply. There's also an implied aspect. Was it practical to do? Well, how is it practical if you can't get a crew there because everybody's sick? What is it practical if the state shut down? Remember, some states left construction open.
Right.
Some states didn't allow any new construction. Some states didn't allow any discretionary construction. What they were letting for was emergency construction. So, you know, the pipe bursts, the plumber can come in and fix the pipe. If it warped the floors and created a danger, you can come in and replace the floors. But you're not allowed to do decorative, what they call decorative changes. So you have that aspect as well. So don't just let them bully you into saying you're responsible for this delay. The answer is I'm not responsible for this delay. And by the way, you may have problems. Be very careful of this. You may be delayed. It may be your turn to do it. And if you come in there and they're not ready for you to put the floors in because of all the other delays, document it. Tell them. This will cause a delay in when we can come in and do the floors because I have other obligations.
Right.
Make sure you warn everybody. Okay? And any new jobs, do the same thing. Warn them. Be aware we are subject to local rules and restrictions. We are subject to potential sickness in our crews and potential shutdowns because of those people getting the virus. And that can cause delays, and we will not be held responsible for those delays. Make sure you either write that in your contract or send an email about it to verify it, okay?
Got a quick question here. Is there a time limit on asking for any of these loans at this point in time?
Well, the loans have to be, at the moment, the loans are given and the 8-week period stops on June 30th. So if you get one before June 30th, you can get one up to them. It looks like the 8-week stop is that time. That's not been made clear, but I think, and as of June 30th, there'll be no more of these loans available. For the PPP loans, the emergency loans also expire, but they don't expire until the end of the year. The opportunity for them, and many of these other loans and grants are available now. When they'll expire locally, I cannot tell you because that depends on the state and the locale.
And what about a DBA? Can they get a PPP loan to run their business if he doesn't claim himself as an employee?
Who doing business as?
Yeah.
Folks. Well, they're probably either an LLC or a
Sole proprietor.
Or sole proprietor. And so whether you're operating under a DBA or whether you're operating under your own name, it doesn't matter. You'll still fill out taxes on that. And so you're going to end up using your tax amount. Remember, if you're an independent or self-employed, it gets complicated here. If you're self-employed and you're a subchapter S corporation, then you're an employee of that corporation. Okay? And if you take taxes as subchapter S corporation, as an LLC or a partnership, you pay yourself in taxes. You pay yourself as an employee, and you take all the payroll taxes and everything else you normally do for every other payroll. And your salary counts. If you're an LLC and you self-employed and don't pay yourself a regular salary, then you're going to go to your 1040 Schedule C and figure out the loan amount. But yes, you can pay yourself.
Gotcha. And then we've got another one here on the 3.75% no payment for 12 months. If you pay that back in full, is it with the interest?
Okay. If you pay back the amount, it's a 1% for the PPP loan. It's 3.75% for the emergency industry disaster loans. Okay. Whichever loan you pay back, both of them carry interest, and yes, you'll have to pay the interest as well, but there is no prepayment penalty. So whatever interest accrued to the moment you paid it, you pay it back, that interest will be due. But you will not have many times you pay a loan back early. There's also a prepayment penalty because they didn't make all the interest they intended to make. There's no prepayment penalty here.
Great. And quick one probably from Janice on I guess there was something you mentioned. What do you mean by the rules have changed based on reserves on PPP?
Okay. The PPP loan requires you to certify that you needed it because of the virus has created a business necessity for it, financial necessity for it. Okay. They subsequently came out and said, well, what we mean, they were very concerned with all these large public corporations that operated multiple restaurants and hotels and things of that nature, claiming these loans because each individual location could claim a loan. So the Small Business Administration came out and said, wait a minute, if you have reserves available or other access to capital, then you don't have this emergency. And that's what they said. And you're going to have to prove and document why you needed the loan, okay? You always have to do that. Well, what happened is that about a week ago or so, small business came out and said, wait a minute, we realize that anybody who gets a loan under $2 million will have some kind of financial need for it, just by the nature of their size. And therefore, we're going to deem all of those loans as necessary, whether you have reserves or not. So if you're under $2 million, you're already deemed as a need, and you're not going to have to prove that need any longer. Your forgiveness will not be affected by that need. If you're over $2 million and they can show you actually did not have the need, there's no penalty. You just pay the loan back. It's not like you're going to be held for lying, or filing a false statement. But if you're over $2 million or $2 million or more, you're going to automatically be audited when you pay the loan back.
Okay, I got kind of a long one here, so I'm going to read it out to you and see if you can answer this one for Lisa. Okay, they state June 30th for the final FTE at the end of your 8 weeks. Our 8 weeks ends June 14th. Unfortunately, on June 15th, we will have to lay off / terminate some employees who are being paid with the PPP. What happens when we send our payroll protection forgiveness application in on June 15th and state the final head count for June 14th? Will they come back and ask us what is on June 30th? This would be 2 weeks after our 8-week period ended. I don't want this to affect our forgiveness when we had the proper head count during our 8-week period.
The rules and the statute are a monument to unclarity. They are hard to follow, they're hard to do, but the only reasonable interpretation, in my opinion, is it ends at the end of the 8 weeks. You compare, because the statute said you compare the full-time employee equivalents for the 8-week period to the average full-time employee equivalents during one of the two periods, either February 15th, 2019 to June 30th, 2019, or the average full-time employee equivalents between January 1st, 2020 and February 29th, 2020, and it's the borrower, the person who got the loans, decision which period to pick. So it shouldn't go, but the loan, the program itself at the moment ends on June 30th. So that should not impact you. I cannot tell you for sure because some of the things they've interpreted have been a little bit unusual, but about 90% of what I predicted they do has been done. And I'm pretty sure that by the statute itself language, it has to end at the end of the 8 weeks. Because many of you have brought people back on just to get you 70, you might as well pay them, help them out. That's the whole purpose of a paycheck protection. It doesn't say small business protection, it says paycheck protection program. Was to bring people back on so they didn't have to do unemployment. They felt they were still contributing. They were part of your business. They wanted you to maintain that business relationship. And therefore, they wanted you to pay them and bring them back on. Well, if you don't need them after the 8 weeks, what are you going to do?
Sure.
So I can't imagine that being done that way.
Okay. Well, Jeff, I got to tell you.
It looks like there's another question.
Yeah, they did have pop one. I don't quite understand it. Maybe you do.
I think I do. It says, if the loan is for $2 million or more, upon repayment, you will be subject to audit. And they said they're going to audit all loans that are $2 million or more, PPP loans. If it's under $1 under $2 million, then they will not question the need for the loan. You are still subject to an audit, but that'll be done randomly. And the reason they will not they deemed all of those certifications of need correct is because they simply would be overwhelmed with audits if they had to do it. So there's unlikely, if you're under $2 million, you will be audited. But you don't get silly here. Don't do something stupid. But it's unlikely that you will you'll be audited after that, and they will never question whether you needed the loan or not, because that is automatically now been deemed correct. Anything over $2 million or $2 million or more, you're subject to an audit and you have to justify the loan.
Got it. Okay. Well, Jeff, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and answering these questions, and a bunch of great questions, so much information. And like Jeff said, we had discussed before this call that, maybe be it every other week or so, because this information is changing so rapidly that we would want to make sure that we've certainly got, up-to-date information for you and so forth. So without any other, Jeff, again, I can't thank you enough for coming on and doing this with us. I know how valuable your time is. Also, as far as CFI, we're looking, just with all of the new technology and the different things that you can do now, it's amazing. So we're looking at different things that we're going to be doing from the standpoint of different video clips, training clips, educational clips. When we're doing a lot of our training, especially in the advanced categories, there's so much information in those that we sometimes have guys that come in for that advance and have great hand skills, but never had the opportunity to go somewhere to get this information. So just so you know, we'll actually be doing a lot of different video clips where we can bring some of this information to you. So without anything else, if there's no more questions, let me just take a last check. I don't see any. Jeff, I certainly, again, want to thank you so much. You're certainly a CFI guy all the way, and we appreciate everything you've done for us, and we look forward to doing more with you, Jeff. So thank you,
Robert, and I look forward to doing these with you guys every week or two as well. I think there's a lot of information out there. My heart's with you all, and all I can say to you, everybody, please stay safe and healthy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone that attended. Have a great afternoon.